Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Coldhost back again with another logic tutorial. Today we're going to talk about how to make a enemy go back and forth on a set path and how you can kill them while they're doing that. I guess how to interrupt an enemy's path. It was requested by one of our I guess, watchers, viewers. But the main thing they were asking for, I think they were asking it in the context of a 2D game, but it pretty much works the same in 3D or 2D. First, what I've got is two sculpts. Invisible and non-collidable. If you go to tools, you can also reduce the detail, because you won't really need them to be highly detailed. I've also got an animal sculpt, such as it is, very basic, and one of the duplicated objects grouped with the animal. Outside of the animals group, I've put a microchip using L1 and X to make it adhere to the surface. And once I have that group, I just grouped it with these two things here to create the entire group. Now, the reason why we've done this process is because we're going to have two types of movement. One, we're going to have the movement of the armadillo's whole group back and forth. And two, we're going to have the movement of the armadillo, have the movement of its body while keeping the group separate. And I'll explain that in a moment. So first thing I've animated is the movement of the armadillo. I'm using an action recorder set to keyframe mode. The first keyframe I recorded was its basic movement, which is right here. Just tapped it with R2. Then I moved the playhead forward a bit and made it stop right about here. Then I made it turn, then turn around fully, and I've created another interval almost equal to the first interval of it reaching the original position it started at and then turning to begin the cycle all over again. And an easy thing you want to do is this final area, you can just dupe the first frame since that's pretty much where it's going to start out anyway. And of course it's set to loop. I've lowered the speed a little bit, but that may not be necessary if your animation suits your needs. It's mainly just my own personal decision to make it slower, so the player will have an easier time hopping on it. I've also set it to keep changes, so that when this whole process is shut off, it will stay in place. I'll explain that in a little bit. You may have noticed a wire leading into movement. Well, if we go over to this microchip that's part of the enemy's group, we'll actually see where this wire is coming from. I've laid down a microchip called Walk. Inside here, I have a switch called Power Movement, which is extended to this and powers it on. And the reason why I've done this is because I intend to turn off this microchip when the player has jumped on the enemy. Another thing I have is a little damage modifier, but it's just low enough that you can hop on the enemy without getting damaged. But if you run into the enemy, then you will get hurt. I've also got this little shuffle animation, which is a simple 3-frame recording on an action recorder set to keyframe mode. And all it does is make the thing wiggle, so it's slightly more believable that it's walking. You might have to manually animate the legs for a more complex sculpture. But yeah, this will do for now. It's just a test. Next, if we go over to this microchip, which I have labeled HP, In here, we have a tag called Stomp. When the player's trigger zone, when the player's trigger zone interacts with this, it will essentially kill our enemy. It'll trigger this counter, output, connected. I've also positioned it roughly in the middle so the player has a good chance of hitting it. And the counter is connected to a node. The node is connected to a timeline set to play once called Death. I've also got a little animation of the enemy sort of evaporating. I've got a destroyer set at the end of the animation. And that destroyer, if you go in there with L1 and X, then press L1 and circle to scope outside the entire group. Just take this wire from affected objects and press X on the entire group, because we want to make sure that everything is destroyed when the enemy is destroyed. I've also got another action recorder set to loop, and it's just a single frame, which I've recorded, and all it does is shut off that walk cycle. So it'll shut off the shuffling movement, and it'll shut off the movement between posts, which is why we set it to keep changes earlier, so that it'll stay in the position it last was when everything is shut off. And that's pretty much everything concerning the enemy. Now we're going to get into what kind of logic you need for the player. So if we just scope in here with L1 and X, and then open this up with L1 and X again, and then we go over here to a microchip I have called Stomp. In here, I've put out a trigger zone set to detect a tag called Stomp. And I made it quite wide so that you'll have a pretty good chance of landing on the enemy. But this is basically the zone, or the hurt box, or hit box that's going to collide with this tag labeled Stomp that I showed you earlier. I also have opened up the logic with L1 and X and L1 and square, I should say, and I've powered off this trigger zone. If you just tap X on there, it'll power it off. And I want it so that it's only active when you're in the air. That way you won't be accidentally killing these things just by walking into them. And if you go here to sound effects, which I've just handily used this, I've taken the distance from ground output, which you can reach by doing L1 and square. And if you just go over here to this secondary setting, tap X on it, you'll see distance from ground. I've connected it to a calculator, put it in the A port. I've set it to greater than 0.07, so off that distance of the ground, once you're that high off the ground, I should say, it'll power on this in-air action recorder. I've labeled it in-air. It's set to loop. It's a single frame, and all it does is turn on the Stomp trigger zone, which, if we go back to it and connect it to a node, and then connect a NOT gate to the power of the node, and then connect the node to a timeline, which I've labeled hop, set to play once. On the timeline, I have a trigger or a switch. I connected the NOT gate in order to prevent playback. I also have a little sound effect, a little bouncing sound effect for when we land on the enemy. A mover set to local space, 50% overall dampening, 100% movement strength, 5.5 speed. I've also reoriented it so that it's facing up, because normally it's facing down. Just grab it with R2. If you need to reorient that, you can also mess with that. Next, I've got a little emitter, and all it does is emit this dust cloud, which is paint flecks, right below the player, so that when he stomps on something, it'll create a dust cloud, kind of add a little bit more punch to your, process. And just in case he lands on the enemy in such a way that he gets, you know, touched by the hurt box from this health modifier, I've created an action recorder set to keyframe mode, a single frame, and it's looped, of course, and I've stretched it out. But all it does is go over here to the health manager, which you can find inside controller logic, and set the damage multiplier to 0, so he's essentially invulnerable during this brief period when he's hopped on an enemy. And that's actually all the logic necessary to create the effect. Let's go ahead and test it. And as you can see, the enemy and all the surrounding logic is completely destroyed after you've hopped on its back. It's pretty fun to chain this. Like if you have multiple enemies, let's go ahead and see what that would be like. Just because it's fun. There we go. So hopefully that answers any questions that our viewers may have about this subject and is going to be useful to anyone constructing their own game with this motif contained within. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was an insightful video or otherwise enjoyable. If it was, then go ahead and subscribe if you can, and hit the bell to keep up with our videos. Also, subscribed or not, give a like. If you have any questions or statements, leave a comment. We try to answer all comments. If you like what we do here and want to help out, consider becoming a channel member. Alternatively, you can check out the link in the description to support us through Patreon. Until next time, take it easy. That's all for now.